Have you here, we being me, and look forward as always to getting into our talk. I've been really wanting to kind of drill down on the fundamentals, as I've been saying every week, the fundamentals of this deeper teaching of awakening. Because once we get our bearings and know how to navigate through the simple message of what's really asked of us and what's really going on in terms of the bigger picture, we would be better suited in knowing, how to position ourselves, what practice, etc. And speaking of which, what I do present here on Sunday mornings, like I always say, is basically a menu of different teachings and traditions that you can choose to see what resonates with you. For one of the reasons I do that. The other reason is to show the cross-cultural parallels and what Jung would refer to as the collective unconscious, that there's a part of humanity that's already one, and when we experience the depths of the sacred, we are putting them into very similar archetypes, motifs, symbols, etc. Not always, of course, but in many ways you can see this golden thread of true teaching going throughout different cultures and different times. And so I really enjoy making those connections. I really enjoy seeing those deeper patterns because what it does basically, at least for me, is it gives me this sense of even though it's not within the material sciences where you can see, touch, smell, taste, and hear these teachings, it's within the psychological and spiritual sciences that you can have validation. And if you're somebody like me that at a certain stage I needed scientific proof, again, a quick footnote here, I'm just kind of maybe the green tea is getting to me. One of the books that really helped me like 25 years ago was Ken Wilber's Eye to Eye. If you ever have some kind of need to kind of get a more firm grasp of the different disciplines and how the different sciences are really integral, rather than, you have to be a physicalist or you have to only look at things through a psychological lens or only through a spiritual lens. What Wilber shows in that book, I think does a really good job in doing it, is showing that each level, the physical eye that sees the physical world has its sciences. The psychological eye, right, this eye, has the psychological sciences. And the spiritual eye has the spiritual sciences, and they all follow a very similar method, a scientific method of basically you have the injunction of what is it that's required of me to make this discovery? What must I do to discover this fact that there is such a thing as boiling water or enlightenment? Well, I have to perform certain tasks, certain injunctions. Then I do those injunctions or practices, and then I come up with an illuminated understanding. I now know at what temperature water boils, or I've had the breakthrough, the Kensho, the Satori, in my meditation practice. I can see beyond my conceptual mind. So that those stages of illumination are then followed by what Wilber would say is falsification, that you have to then go amongst people of your peer group, whether it's, physicists and biologists or Zen masters and gurus or people that are more adept and on the path of understanding. And then you kind of weigh your experiences together and see where your illumination maybe can be tweaked a little bit or undergo further development, or you're spot on or what have you. So injunction, illumination, falsification, and then you have your clear understanding. So all of that to say, the fundamentals are important. And one of the ways that we're going to approach this conversation on fundamentals this morning is on the topic of dreams. Okay, so within the wisdom traditions, this notion of dream is a cross-cultural way of describing the ordinary state of consciousness. That consciousness in its ordinary state, its unregenerated state, is asleep. And what's really fascinating is we don't think we're asleep, even though we're asleep. So we seem to have this wherewithal in our present day, our present moment, that, things are happening and we're aware and we're awake. And what these teachings will expose, if we're willing to look, is that we are really a conglomeration of habit patterns, conditioned responses, ways of thinking that are really on autopilot and largely mechanistic. And so we're going to be looking a little bit at the teachings of the Buddha, and you know that Buddha, the name in Sanskrit, means the awakened one. So what that basically implies is all human beings have the potentiality to be Buddha, right? That's really the core teaching of the Mahayana, or the Great Vehicle, that you can be, that you really are, at your core, Buddha. So that means you have to look at what makes you fall asleep, what keeps you asleep. And by creating or cultivating this self-awareness, this mindfulness, you begin to see through this hypnotic trance that most of us are living as for our whole life. So we're going to start with a quote from the Buddha. This is from the Vajracchedika Sutra, the Diamond Cutter Sutra. And this, I don't know if you're into Buddhism, you got to read the Vajracchedika, the Diamond Sutra, because it is one of the most brilliant masterpieces of non-dual teaching. It cuts, that's why it's called the Diamond Cutter. It cuts right through all of the complexity of our thinking and the belief that we're a separate ego entity. So, sutra after sutra, and there are 32 in all in this sutra, are cutting through this false ego that we believe we are and we're asleep as. So the final sutra is entitled here, The Delusion of Appearances. And Subhuti is one of the disciples of the Buddha, so he's introduced here. Subhuti, says the Buddha, someone might fill innumerable worlds with the 7 treasures and give all away in gifts of alms. But if any good man or any good woman awakens the thought of enlightenment and takes even only 4 lines from this discourse, reciting, using, receiving, retaining, and spreading them abroad, and explaining them for the benefit of others, it will be far more meritorious than having given gifts, incalculable wealth to all beings, like physical gold and all of these food and everything that you can lavish at the physical level cannot compare, even if you amped it up to infinite amounts, to knowing this teaching. And this, will be brought out in a second as to why. Now, in what manner may he explain these teachings to others? By detachment from appearances, abiding in real truth. So I tell you, says the Buddha, thus shall ye think of this fleeting world. Okay, so this is the Buddha saying, this is how you should look at the world. A star at dawn. In other words, it's just about to disappear. You can't really see stars when the sun really comes up. So just at that moment of dawn, you can still see the flicker of a star, but short-lived. A bubble in a stream. Look at the world like a bubble in a stream. Effervescent, right? Pop. A flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream. So this is how the Buddha ends the Diamond Sutra. He ends the Diamond Sutra by stating that the world is a dream. The awakened one sees through appearances. The ordinary person stops at appearances. The awakened mind knows that appearances are fleeting, temporary, and like a dream. The ordinary person thinks appearances are reality. We live as an appearance. We live as this body form. And we're only in association with other body forms, and everything that we think, know, and believe stops at the level of appearance. We're like those people in Plato's cave, only fixating on the shadows reflected on the cave wall, asleep. Right? So, these teachings are designed to first expose that. You have to look. You have to get that this is the state of affairs. If you don't look clearly at what's going on, how can you properly diagnose it and then treat it? So, Rumi has something to tell us on this subject. Doesn't mince words right out of the gate. This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. But there's a difference with this dream, everything cruel and unconscious, done in the illusion of the present world. All that does not fade away at the death waking. So in other words, choices matter, and your state of mind follows you. So even though you drop the mortal coil, your karma, Rumi wouldn't say karma, but your choices will certainly follow you, right? You can't leave yourself behind. Wherever you go, there you are, even in the post-mortem. He goes on. All the mean laughing, all the quick sexual wanting, those torn coats of Joseph, they change into powerful wolves that you must face. So in other words, if we didn't live with integrity, if we were, letting the lusty desires get the better of us, if we were not in self-control and purity, keeping ourselves above just animal instincts, those things that seem to be attractive here and tempting and desirous and alluring, when we cross over into that after-death state, they change form, Rumi's saying, and they show their true nature, right? Like ravenous wolves. The retaliation that sometimes comes now, the swift payback hit, is just a boy's game to what the other will be. So in other words, if you're not living with, kindness, if you're violent, if you hurt others, you will, again, take that way of being over there. And sometimes you get your karma paid back to you while you're at this level, at the physical level. And he's saying, even if your life kind of gets difficult because of your past deeds, that's no comparison to what may go on in that altered state, right? Because everything gets heightened. It's kind of like a bad acid trip, that when you go over into that post-mortem state, your unconscious predilections and the hurts and harm that you've done, you have to face them, and they oftentimes become even more intense, says Rumi. You know about circumcision here, it's full castration there. Only guys can appreciate that. And this groggy time we live, this is what it's like. So listen to this now. This is really a great word picture he gives us. So this groggy time that we're living in, right? This life that we think we're awake, but we're really groggy. Listen now. A man goes to sleep in the town where he has always lived, and he dreams he's living in another town. In the dream, he doesn't remember the town he's sleeping in his bed in. He believes the reality of the dream town. The world is that kind of sleep. So Rumi, many centuries ago, brilliantly encapsulates what A Course in Miracles will say in a much more condensed form. You're at home in God, dreaming of exile. You've never left your source. Your dream has you thinking you're in another town, another world, as another self, when in fact you've never left your source as this spirit being that you really are. What you're experiencing as yourself here is a fragment of your soul. It's a spark. And when we come back to knowing this spark, call it the Christ mind, the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha mind, this spark, in Sufism it would be fitra, this divine spark that gives us this ability to say, I am aware, I exist. When we really discover the true nature of this spark, then we will know that we've been asleep. And that spark is the divine light itself. It's the bodhicitta, the illumined citta. Finishing here. The world is that kind of sleep. The dust of many crumbled cities settles over us like a forgetful doze. But we are older than those cities. Like, this is what's also really amazing, is that we think we're this temporary self, that we were born on such and such a day in a very, recent time, 1970, I'll date myself, and that this is me. And I did not exist before 1970. And I have a shelf life, and it's quickly approaching. And so as I look at myself within this very small, limited bandwidth of life experience, I think, as the sleeper, the dreamer, that this is all that I am. And what Rumi is saying is when you discover that divine spark that you really are, you're older than all the oldest cities. You're older than Atlantis and Lemuria. You're older than time. That ought to reorientate you. So we began as a mineral. He had another poem we looked at last week that was very similar in this vein. We began as a mineral, we emerged into plant life, and into the animal state, and then into being human. And always we have forgotten our former states, except in early spring, when we slightly recall being green again. That's how a young person turns toward a teacher. That's how a baby leans toward the breast, without knowing the secret of its desire, yet turning instinctively. So again, he's giving us an allusion to how to approach this secret teaching, this esoteric teaching. He would call it, tasawwuf, Sufism, but others would call it other names. This secret teaching is instinctual. It's not something that you will have to force yourself to know. There's something in you that knows it already. You are already the Buddha. This is your core identity. All we're trying to do is turn down the static of the false thinking mind and get out of the hypnotic spell of the false ego. And when we can turn our attention directly onto the I am of who we really are, we'll see that we're awake. And we'll see that everybody else that has this awareness, every living thing, and God forgive me for the way I treated the earthworms this morning that were trying to get into my house. Every little thing, even the earthworms, are reflections of this divine awareness. So it's instinctual. We just have to be willing to pay attention to it. And once we do, it's going to naturally unfold for us if we want it. And then finishing. Humankind is being led along an evolving course through this migration of intelligences. And though we seem to be sleeping, there is an inner wakefulness that directs the dream. And that will eventually startle us back to the truth of who we are. Okay? Nicely said, Rumi. And so this instinctual intelligence that's guiding the whole dream will sometimes appear, like for Rumi's tradition, as a prophet or a Buddha or an avatar. That we're getting help. The Holy Spirit comes in within the internal experiences that we have, that we actually have higher guidance that's helping us move through this journey from sleeping to waking. So it's really important for us, especially in our beginning stages of getting on the path, to recognize that as soon as you choose to get on the path, you're no longer alone. And if you truly want to wake up, right? Seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be opened. Like as soon as you want it, it will be given to you. You will be led along the path. Shockingly sometimes, that wow, this wasn't just my own fantasy, that things are really happening now, that I've popped out of this daydream that I've been in. Right? So let's not lose sight of this wakeful awareness that Rumi just mentioned, right? That this wakeful awareness is really the gold, it's the treasure hidden in the field. It's the pearl of great price. It's the philosopher's stone. And you have it already. And I keep coming back to that story in the Lotus Sutra where the Buddha says that, two friends got drunk. One friend stitched the priceless gem within the lapel of his other friend's coat and left. And years later, he comes back and the guy's eating out of garbage cans. He's just destitute. And the whole while, he has a priceless gem stitched within his lapel. And that is the mani, that is the jeweled mind, right? Om mani padme hum. That mani, that is the jewel. And so this jewel hidden in the lotus is what we are already. And so we just have to turn our attention to it. So this is why it's very important to see that sleep is a choice. Sleep is a choice. And we don't always look at it that way. But the way that this choice plays out in a very ordinary way is whatever you're putting your attention on, you're making real. So when you pay attention to illusions on the cave wall, just staying at the level of appearances and form, your attention is validating the reality of illusion. And so now illusions are reality. And illusions are effervescent bubbles. They are never the same in one instant. You can't step in the same river twice. Right? That was Zeno. Zeno said that, and then his disciple comes along and says, you can't even step in the same river once. Because as soon as you begin to put your foot down, that river is rushing under your foot. So by the time you reach the bottom, it's a completely different river. That's how every moment is. Things are flashing and moving so quickly, the electrons are blipping in and out of the quantum vacuum so quickly, everything is always changing. If you think you can anchor your safety and security at the level of appearance, you'll never have peace. Ever. It's all uncertainty, right? The whole fabric of space-time is rooted within an uncertainty principle. You can never have certainty. if you stay at the level of appearance. It will always create anxiety if you try to identify as the separate body identity, the false ego, and then try to make your happiness at the level of form. You'll never find it. Ever. Has it worked? Has anybody found it yet? Give me a hand. Is anybody like totally happy here? I rest my case. There's the falsification right there. Right? We've just proved the theory. So, we have to then recognize that we are asleep and identified as the superficial self. And, of course, in Miracles has some very nice things to say. They might not sound nice to the ego, but they are quite helpful. This is in chapter 18, section 3, for those who want to know. You who have spent your lives in bringing truth to illusion, reality to fantasy, have walked the way of dreams. So what he's getting at there is, we are the divine spark. This light that illuminates our awareness is divinity itself. It is reality. And when that light returns to its source, we will be in non-dual gnosis. We will be in true knowledge. And we will realize that all of it is us. God is all in all, and God is me. Not the narcissistic me, but the real me. So this light is reality. And what Jesus is saying is, we have the unique capacity as children of God to misuse our will, like Mickey Mouse taking the book of the wizard and doing it his own way. And as we did this, we created fantasies. And because we're creators or co-creators, our fantasies can look like realities. They're simulations. We're like, game designers at that superconscious level, and we entered the simulation as an icon. And we forgot we made the game. And now we're in the matrix of our own game. And we're not satisfied because we forgot who we really are. We are now walking the way of dreams. Right? For you have gone from waking to sleeping and on to yet a deeper sleep. Each dream has led to other dreams, and every fantasy that seemed to bring a bright light into the darkness, but made the darkness deeper. When Buddha said to Subhuti in the Diamond Sutra, it doesn't matter how meritorious you are in the dream. You're still dreaming. You can give your whole life away. You can, donate billions of dollars to the poor and build hospitals. Not that that doesn't help at the dream level, but if you think that there's some lasting merit to that, that's delusion. The whole point here in these teachings is you have to wake up from being the dream. Right? So every time we think we got a light in the dream, found the right partner, got the right job, made enough money, these lights are still within the dreamscape. They are not real lights. They're luciferic light. They flash and then they're gone. Right? They are attractive, but then when we put all of our attention on them, they disappoint. And we're back in the darkness. Yes? And then, just a few lines down, this famous passage from the Course, it doesn't really fit exactly, but it needs to be said. If you knew who walks beside you on this way to awakening, which you have chosen, fear would be impossible. So know that as you're coming out of the dream, you're not alone. As soon as you decided or chose to get on this path, you have mighty helpers coming alongside you to make sure you reach your destination. That's the given. And then just a little bit more here. So now Jesus in this section is saying, we think there's a difference between the waking experience and when we go to bed at night and we dream, right? When we're dreaming asleep in our beds, we really think that's a different reality than when we wake up. Now listen, he says when you're sleeping, dreams show you that you have the power to make a world as you would have it. And that because you want it, you see it, right? Getting to that Freudian idea that dreams are wish fulfillment. And while you see it, you do not doubt that the world you've made within your dream is real, yes? Right? Very real. Only sometimes, if ever, do we wake up within the dream. Has anybody had that experience? The lucid dream. You wake up, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not even here, I'm dreaming. But for the most part, 99% of the time for most of us, we are asleep. And that dream that we're dreaming while asleep, reality. So he says, yet here is a world that you think is real, clearly within your mind, and it seems to be outside. You do not respond to it as though you made it, nor do you realize that the emotions which the dream produces must come from you. It is the figures in the dream and what they do that seems to make the dream. You do not realize that you are making them act for you. For if you realized that you're literally giving the dream figures their script on how to behave towards you, he says, then you would realize that they're not guilty because you've given them the way of acting towards you. So the guilt wouldn't rest on them, but then the illusion of satisfaction would be gone, he says. We want them to be guilty so we can appear innocent. This is the purpose of dreaming. Other people pay for our guilt. We're not wrong. We're not at fault. These dream figures that come in to disturb our peace and to create chaos in our lives and to upset us, they're wrong. Right? That's the dream. And then he says something very important here. In dreams, these features are not obscure. You seem to awaken and the dream is gone. So now you wake up for church, right? You get up this morning, you come here. But what you fail to recognize is that what caused the dream has not gone, even though you're now seemingly awake. Your wish to make another world that is not real remains with you. Right? So right here, right now, what he's saying is we are using the power of our mind and our good and bad thoughts to overlay the present moment with all of our past learning, our expectations, our wants, our desires, our fears as the separate ego. It's all we're seeing right now. It's all you're hearing right now. I don't know what you're hearing. What you're hearing is your own lexicon, your own database of meaning that you're pairing up with the words that you hear me say. And then you're arranging them according to your own interpretation. What he's saying is that's part of the dream. When you can start catching that, you're like, wow. I even thought, because I'm getting the teaching, that this is something different. But no, it's just another way of sleeping. But you could use these words, like Buddha said, like fingers pointing to the moon. They could shock you. They could jar you. They can get you into the gap between thoughts so that you're no longer identified with this endlessly murmuring voice of the hypnotist that says you're here and this is you. And finishing up. Your wish to make another world that is not real remains with you, and what you seem to wake to is but another form of this same world you see in dreams. Right? That's why only Buddha is awake. That's what Buddha means. If you don't know yourself, if we don't know ourselves as Buddha, then we just went from one dream to another dream. This isn't real. Am I freaking you out? I mentioned weeks ago, there's that wonderful scene at the end of Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise. And he's, spoiler, I always say it, but he's in a coma. And for 150 years, he's been living the life he thought just was continuing after he had the car accident. But he's been in a coma for 150 years. But at one point, you don't know it yet, he's at a restaurant. And this guy comes alongside him and says, "I'm tech support." And he begins to tell Tom Cruise what the deal really is. He's not even here. This is a mirage, a hallucination. He's dreaming. And what's really fascinating is Tom Cruise gets to the point where he wants the real world. He wants to wake up. He doesn't want to live a lie anymore. So the tech guy takes him to the top of a building, very zen, where you got to jump off. Right? In that Zen koan, you get to the top of a 100-foot pole, you got to jump off. So this is Tom Cruise's jumping off point. And what's really beautiful is Penelope Cruz was his love interest. And she's there, and he gets to have the closure that he didn't get with Penelope Cruz. And she was the one that really was driving him towards self-knowledge. We're going to talk about this again when we mention the Truman Show with Jim Carrey. There's this, in these myths, especially in the Gnostic myths, if you're familiar with Gnostic Christianity, Sophia is the goddess of wisdom. And she's the one that inspires this higher knowledge to wake up. So in these movies, they know this a lot of the times, and they write it into their script. So Tom Cruise sees his Sophia in the form of Penelope Cruz, and he then says he's ready. And then in that waking up moment, he jumps off the building and leaves his old life behind. Gone. Right? Complete leap. Quantum leap. Awake. So what he's saying to us is we seem to wake up, but just another form of the dream is playing out right now. That's why he'll then say this. He puts this word in italics. All your time is spent in dreaming. All your time is spent in dreaming. What is this world, Subhuti? It's a dream. Wakey, wakey. Your sleeping and your waking dreams have different forms, and that is all. Their content is the same. Dreams are your protest against reality and represent your fixed and insane wish to change reality. If you want to know more about your insanity, tomorrow night at 7:15, please do yourself a favor. Are we having fun yet? Okay. Well, we've been enjoying the teachings of Gurdjieff and the Fourth Way the past few weeks, so a little bit more, again from P.D. Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous. So Gurdjieff says this in light of our conversation. The chief obstacle in the way of acquiring self-consciousness consists in the fact that we think we possess self-consciousness already. The chief obstacle in your awakening to being truly self-conscious is that you think you're self-conscious now. That is, and I'll change it to the pronoun here, they possess self-consciousness and everything connected with it. Individuality in the sense of a permanent and unchangeable I, a true will, an ability to do, and so on, is what everyone believes about themselves. It is evident that a person will not be interested if you tell him that he can acquire by long and difficult work something which, in his opinion, he already has. What's the point of doing all this deep searching and questioning and meditating and studying? I'm already there. That's why a lot of the times the distortion of the non-dual teachings can wreak havoc if you don't really want to wake up. So you're already Buddha. Okay, I don't have to do anything. That's not the case. You're asleep, dreaming you're a Buddha. That's not Buddha. So it says now, a man is immersed in dreams. Whether he remembers them or not does not matter. Even if some real impressions reach him, such as sounds, voices, warmth, cold, the sensation of his own body, they arouse in him only fantastic subjective images. So everything that we are encountering in terms of stimuli in the world, in this conversation, what we are calling up in our awareness are our own subjective, conditioned responses. It's unsettling if you're really paying attention. It's unsettling because what begins to really dawn is the fact that I'm in a trance state. Even when I think I'm awake, it's a trance. But when you can accept that, you can then realize that's why life is unsatisfactory, right? That's the first noble truth of the Buddha. Life is dukkha. Life is unsatisfactory. It leads to increased states of anxiety and suffering because I'm not really living. I'm in a trance. And the only way, according to the Buddha, that I can get out of this trance is I have to go to 0 point. I have to go to Nirodha. I have to stop generating the trance state. How do I do that? First, you have to recognize, as it says in A Course in Miracles, everything I see and everything I think is meaningless. Try that one on. Everything I think is meaningless. And I can spout some really highfalutin ideas. Meaningless. Why? Because I'm the sleeper saying these highfalutin ideas. They might sound good. They might tickle your ears. But it's just one sleeper to another. That's where Gurdjieff says this. A very important moment, no, that's not it. If we take an average cultured man, we shall see that in the vast majority of cases, his personality, the false ego, is the active element in him, while his true essence is passive, not even in his awareness. The inner growth of a man cannot begin so long as this order of things remains unchanged. Personality must become passive, and essence must become active. So in other words, at the personality level, I can be charismatic, brilliant, a joy to listen to. All of that is true, I know. Funny. But that's just my personality. Love it as you may. But all of it is a false front. And if you only stay with that reality of me, it's one sleeper to another. That's why Gurdjieff says this: it is possible to think for 1,000 years. It is possible to write whole libraries of books, to create theories by the million, and all this in sleep, without any possibility of awakening. Ooh. On the contrary, these books and these theories, written and created in sleep, will merely send other people to sleep. Wild. That's why his student, Jeanne de Salzman, Gurdjieff's student, she says, echoing Gurdjieff, we need to have a shock. We need something actually to disturb our sleep in order to begin to come out of it. So if you're just sitting under a teaching that strokes you in the right way, like, yes, this is it. Yes, you're good. All is well. It's all okay. It's just on to further dreams. Oftentimes, the teacher or the teaching has to shake you, has to rattle you, has to disturb you. Because without that shock, you'll never get a real impression of yourself, the real I am. It will just be another way of dreaming about the I am. Right? That's why he says there is nothing new in the idea of sleep. People have been told almost since the creation of the world that they are asleep and that they must awaken. How many times is this said in the Gospels, for instance? Awake, watch, sleep not. Christ's disciples even slept when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane for the last time. It is all there. But do men understand it? Men take it simply as a form of speech, as an expression, as a metaphor. They completely fail to understand that it must be taken literally. And again, it is easy to understand why. In order to understand this literally, it is necessary to awaken a little, or at least to try to awaken. I tell you seriously, says Gurdjieff, that I have been asked several times why nothing is said about sleep in the Gospels, although it is there spoken of almost on every page. This simply shows that people read the Gospels in sleep. So long as a man sleeps profoundly and is wholly immersed in dreams, he cannot even think about the fact that he is asleep. So, one of the attributes or qualities of a miracle, according to A Course in Miracles, is that a miracle breaks up erroneous perception. It shatters the facade that we've been living as. It shows us that the idols that we've been paying attention to at the level of form are ephemeral hallucinations, and that they will never satisfy us, no matter how much we try to make our fantasy reality. And so the miracle comes in as a disruption, a disturbance, a problem, a crisis, something very unpleasant perhaps at first, so that we can come out of the robotic spell of always trying to maintain the status quo of our life. Because remember, you're given a very short window to make this existential choice, the choice that determines whether you are on that upward arc of true life or you stay within the whirlpool of samsara. What are you going to pay attention to? What is important to you? In the words of Paul Tillich, what is your ultimate concern? What is your ultimate concern? So finally, Jean de Salzman's book, The Reality of Being, again, the Fourth Way Teachings of Gurdjieff. Just a little bit here. So this section, the chapter title is I Am Asleep, right? And then the section, I Am Not Here. Right? Like Rumi, right? You're in a dream town. Stuart is a dream town. Planet Earth is a dream town. Ordinarily, impressions are received in a mechanical way. They are received by our personality, which reacts with automatic thoughts and feelings that depend on its conditioning. We do not assimilate impressions because personality itself cannot be alive. It's dead. Our personality is this dead zombie-like thing that we keep dragging into the present moment. It's a Frankenstein. We've patchworked all of these experiences that we've had at a very limited understanding of life, and we think this is who we are. It is the epitome of ignorance. If I go through life as John, it's a Frankenself. It's made up of dead things, dead experiences, dead interpretations, half-lit truths. And this is what I'm holding to be my divine and glorious self? So she's saying here, everything that I'm hearing, listening to, feeling, sensing, emoting, is coming from this hypnotic spell that I have as the Frankenself. In order to be assimilated and transformed, impressions have to be received by your essence. This requires a conscious effort at the moment of the impression, and it requires a definite feeling, a feeling of love for being. I want to go home. I want to wake up. I want to know who I am. I want to be in the presence of God and know it. We must respond to impressions no longer from the vantage point of personality, but from love for being present. So I mentioned this, I think, once before, maybe in another class, but I'm starting to feel the need to have a Buddhist class. It's going to be on a Tuesday night, probably within a month or two. And one of the reasons that's motivating this choice is I want to meditate with groups. I want to meditate with a group, and I want to go through these Dharma teachings of being present, being mindful. Because this is what she's saying. In order to really know your essence, you have to become aware of the fact that we are robotically putting into this experience our past self. And without quieting the mind and seeing clearly, we won't be able to respond from our essence. Okay? Finishing up here. So by responding from love for being present, this will transform our whole way of thinking and feeling. The first necessity is to have a genuine impression of myself. This begins with a shock when the question, who am I, arises. Right? Who's really listening right now? Who's really seeing right now? Who's the one that's able to step out of the personality and view it, watch it? Right? This I that can detach from the conditioned I or self is what needs to be paid attention to. That's what meditation really is. It's sitting and being aware of your awareness. And that awareness is love. It is compassion. It is wisdom. It is the jewel. Okay? So, speaking of jewels, empty your pockets. The blue bag's going to go around. Remember, your true nature is also generosity. It's the first virtue that we cultivate on the Buddhist path, is generosity. So thank you. If you're joining in the virtual land, you can click on the link below, and we thank you for donating to the 8 a.m. service. Thoughts, feelings? John?
When I woke up this morning on this rainy day, my joints were all aching and everything. I felt really old because of barometric pressure.
Yeah.
Now, thanks to you, I don't feel old anymore. I feel ancient.
Oh, good. Excellent. You remind me, in the Taoist tradition, you know of Lao Tzu, right? Lao Tzu is the alleged author of the Tao Te Ching, and his name translated can be ancient boy. So in other words, it's both. It's like you're older than time and you're newborn every moment. So no achy joints. Bless the offering. And we charge the offering with the intention that it bring light and true knowledge to all who may be impacted by this gift, in whatever form it may be. And so it is. Amen. Other thoughts, questions, comments before we end? Okay, let's stand and seal the deal. Coming to rest in the home of the heart, the still point at the core of our being, where the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Now get out of this dream town. Be the light that you are. Thank you, guys.